Hi everybody, this is Everyday Commentary, and this is a video overview of this knife. And I put this knife out of frame like this, so you can see, you can be shocked by just how tiny this knife is. This is a Microtech UTX70. And the UTX series is a series of knives that are smaller than the Microtech Ultratech, which was their sort of standard bearer switchblade, out the front switchblade. This is the 70, so it's the smallest. They have one that's slightly larger, just a little bit larger, the 85, and then they have the UTX itself. This one runs a 2.4-inch blade, and I was able to get one from the 2015 run. And this is an LMAX blade, and as you can see, it is a sort of drop point blade. One thing that I was told by somebody who knows a lot about switchblades is that if you want to get a switchblade and you want to actually use it as opposed to play around with it, get a single edge switchblade because they are easier to sharpen, much easier to sharpen than a double edged switchblade. I never really thought about that, but the way you sharpen, sometimes it just could get a mess. It could make a mess. So I got a single edge. Now they have a bunch of variations. You can get it with a Tonto grind, you can get it with a true spear point where it has both edges sharpened. You can get it with serrations, you can get it with serrations on one side and straight edge on the other. I chose to get the drop point because this is the most functional of the knives. And you can see there's a bunch of little screws on here that use Microtech's proprietary fasteners, which stink, but I don't plan on ever opening this knife because it's just a lot of little tiny parts and I don't really care that much. So I wouldn't open it and it doesn't really bother me. That being said, I'd always prefer to have non-proprietary fasteners if possible. A couple other things about the knife. It has a little glass breaker, and the glass breaker is built into the clip, which is quite ingenious. I haven't seen that on any other pocket clip. It is just a continuation of the pocket clip that they shaped into a glass breaker. Also functions as a lanyard hole, which is another really good design idea. This is an over-the-carry pocket clip, and as you can see, it has a double dip. And there's one there, and then there's one there, much like the Sebenza clip, which I absolutely love. And one of the things that's nice is you put it in, and then you get that second push, you know, sort of going over the lip of your jeans or whatever, to know that it's really locked in there. And once it's in there, and this thing is buried. Another thing that's really crazy about this knife is it is tiny. It is thin. It's thinner than an iPhone, and it's not even as wide as my index finger, and I have medium-sized hands. I don't have like giant bare hands. So it's very slim. A couple things that are strange. This is my first out the front, and so I'm always a little worried. Like when I'm driving in the car and I'm fidgeting with my knife, it always just makes me a little extra concerned. Like if I put it down and it slides down into my lap, I'm like, oh gosh. So I know it can never fire. It can never accidentally fire because two things. Number one, I mean, I guess it could accidentally fire, but it's unlikely. Number one, the travel on the button is positively enormous. So it's not just like a flick of a switch. You have to really have it travel a long way. But more importantly, in terms of safety features, this spring is heavy. I mean, you have to really wrench down on it to pull it, and then really wrench down on it to pull it back. And as you can see, the knife has a lot of firepower to it. Let me see if I can find a piece of paper. You can see it has enough, it'll pierce a piece of paper. But if you take it and you put it into, like, say, the bottom of your shoe, it'll stop the fire. It won't go through like the rubber of your shoe. The knife itself is just very, very well made. One thing that I was worried about, because there's a spring and then a carriage system and then another spring that holds the button in place, is that, and then like two little locking doors inside, is that it would rattle a lot. And if you hold the clip down so that the clip doesn't make noise, I mean, it doesn't rattle much at all. The knife itself, it surprisingly, despite the fact that it basically looks like a pack of gum, there's a couple of little curves here. I'm not even sure if you can see them, but it does give you good purchase. I mean, it does give you a good hold on the knife. A couple things that I noticed about the knife that I didn't really like. Let's see if I can get it to. So there's still some like CNC lines on the grind. The main grind is pretty, it's not rough, it's a stone wash finish, but you can still see them. The edge is really sharp. I mean, this is like Spyderco from the factory sharp, so that's good. But here's a couple things. Number one, lots of blade play. Just an enormous amount of blade play. And if I would have made this video a year ago, I would sit here and tell you, well, it's an out the front, and all out the fronts have to have some blade play in order to get the blade to go through the motion of popping out and get it to slide back in. There's a carriage system and springs, and it's just the nature of out the front knives that they're always going to have a little blade play. Well, that was a year ago. Now, Grant and Gavin Hawk have shown off at Blade Show their Deadlock system, which is an out the front that has zero blade play. And so they've really solved the blade play problem. And that makes a big difference to me, because it just means that this is not a state-of-the-art switchblade. That the state-of-the-art switchblade is a Grant and Gavin Hawk switchblade with the Deadlock. And Anthony Marfione is the guy that owns Microtech. And if I were him, I would go and I would just buy the patent from Grant and Gavin Hawk. No one has more invested in switchblades than he does. No one has more to gain by having that patent than he does. And no one has more to lose by having that patent go to a competitor. If ProTech or Kershaw or somebody else bought that patent and they were able to say, you know, we have out the fronts with no blade play, I think that would be a difference maker in the market. I mean, out the front market is a pretty small market compared to the regular knife market as it is because of legality issues. Oh, by the way, check your local knife laws for legal issues. But if somebody were able to say, every one of my knives is better made than every one of the Microtech knives, that would be a big deal. I mean, Microtech is a premium brand, you know, sort of the Benchmade or CRK of the switchblade world. And so if somebody was able to one-up them and just say that, you know, like, look, our knives are just better, that would be an issue. So if I were Anthony Marfione, if I was a businessman, a business consultant advising him, I would tell him, go buy that patent. Because no one has more to gain and no one has more to lose than he does. Worst case scenario, somebody like Kai or Cold Steel goes and buys that patent and then makes a line of premium switchblades that all but put Microsoft out of business. Or Microtech out of business. So, just a little blade wiggle in every direction. I've used this knife a couple times. I got it 2 days ago, and it's not like completely impractical, but I'm gonna be honest and say that this is more fun than anything else. Like I'm not gonna use this knife as like an everyday carry knife. Number one, because of legality issues. Number two, because of like scaring the bejesus out of people. And number three, because it's just not as practical as say something like my Barlow. No one's gonna be scared by this knife. This knife has the same, if not bigger, cutting edge. Yeah, it's about the same, a little bit bigger. And it's just one of those things, it's like, eh. But if you want a knife that will put a smile on your face, that is fun to play around with, that is fun to hold and carry and open and close, then this is the knife for you. I mean, it is just a blast to have. The one thing I would say is that these are relatively expensive. I got this at Blade HQ. It was about 200 bucks. So, you know, it's not a competitively priced knife in comparison to other pocket knives. It's not as good as, say, like the Spyderco Dragonfly ZDP189, which is a better steel and probably a better design for half or less money. But it is a fun knife to have. And it's sort of one of those things like, if you don't have an out the front in your collection, it's not going to make you sad to have one, because they are just enormously fun to play with. So look for a review of this knife on Everyday Commentary, and I'm not sure when I'm going to get around to it, but man, this is a fun knife to play with. If you thought flippers were fun to play with, oh, go get this knife. Like I said, not practical, but sometimes you want to just have some fun, and this is fun.